Let's start with the truth. Most people never want to admit you're not scared of being alone. You're scared of what you'll find when the world goes silent, and I get it. We live in a time where silence is more terrifying than chaos. We fill our days with background noise, scrolling, swiping, messaging, binging, anything to avoid being left with just ourselves. But the truth is, the longer you run from solitude, the further you drift from who you really are. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you sat with yourself, not just physically alone, but emotionally honest? No music, no phone, no distractions. Just you, your thoughts, your fears, your truth. Most people avoid that moment because they're terrified of what it might reveal. But what if that fear is actually the doorway to everything you're looking for? You see, solitude isn't punishment, it's preparation. It's the sacred space where you stop being who the world told you to be and start becoming who you were born to be. I remember a time in my life when everything felt noisy, not just externally, but inside my own mind. There was this pressure to keep showing up for others, to keep performing, to be available, to be liked. I thought that the more people I surrounded myself with, the more valuable I was. But over time, I realized I was losing something deeper. My clarity, my connection to myself was fading. And that's when I chose to go silent, not out of bitterness, not to punish anyone, but to meet myself again. At first, it was uncomfortable. The silence felt heavy. But as the layers of noise peeled away, what emerged wasn't weakness, it was strength. Not the kind of strength that flexes for attention, but the kind that sits in stillness, unmoved by the chaos around it. Solitude became my teacher. But why is this so hard for so many? Because we've been conditioned to believe that being alone means being broken, that if you're not constantly surrounded by people, you're failing at life, that if you're not being texted, tagged, invited, validated, you don't matter. That's a lie. Being alone doesn't mean you're unloved. It means you're brave enough to love yourself without needing an audience. In solitude, you realize you don't need constant validation to know your worth. You don't need attention to feel important. You don't need someone's approval to feel lovable. You just need alignment with your soul, your purpose, and your truth. But here's the hardest part. When the world goes quiet, your wounds get loud. That's why so many people run back into the noise. They don't want to face the unresolved pain they've been burying for years, the heartbreak they never healed from, the guilt they never released, the identity they never questioned. But listen to me, avoiding the pain won't make it disappear. It only makes it more powerful. What you refuse to confront will quietly control your life. The insecurities you never dealt with, they'll show up in your relationships. The anger you suppress, it'll leak into your decisions. The fears you deny, they'll sabotage your potential. But when you embrace solitude, something incredible happens. You stop running, you stop numbing, and you start listening. And what you hear is your soul whispering, I'm still here. Let's rebuild. Solitude forces you to ask better questions. Not what do people think of me, but what do I actually think of myself? Not what's wrong with me, but what have I been carrying that doesn't belong to me anymore? Not how do I get them to love me, but how do I start loving myself so deeply that I stop begging for crumbs? That kind of self-inquiry only happens when you're willing to sit in silence. And I'll be real with you, it's not always peaceful. Sometimes solitude feels like a storm. Sometimes you'll cry, you'll want to quit, you'll feel exposed. But don't run. That's where the healing begins. Because true peace isn't found by escaping your pain. It's found by facing it and walking through it. Here's what most people never realize. Solitude isn't empty. It's full. Full of answers, full of wisdom, full of clarity, but only for those courageous enough to slow down and listen. The strongest people I know didn't become strong by being surrounded all the time. They became strong by being shaped in silence, by sitting with themselves, by learning to enjoy their own company, by building a relationship with the one person they'll never lose, themselves. And when you learn to do that, something shifts. You become unshakable. Not because nothing bothers you, but because you know who you are without needing anyone else to remind you. That's what solitude gives you, identity without dependency. So here's my challenge to you. Don't just tolerate solitude, honor it. Don't just survive the quiet seasons, lean into them. Because when you finally learn to enjoy your own company, you stop entertaining anyone who disrupts your peace. You stop chasing people who only loved the version of you that needed them. You stop performing for attention and you start choosing yourself not out of ego, but out of alignment. The world doesn't need more people who are liked by everyone. It needs more people who know themselves deeply and act from that place of clarity. And that clarity is born in solitude. So let me leave you with this. What's the one thing you've been avoiding by staying busy, distracted, and connected all the time? What truth is waiting for you in the silence? Drop it in the comments below. Let's create a space for honesty and growth. And if this message spoke to you, share it with someone who needs the reminder. Like, comment, and subscribe. Because this journey towards self-mastery, identity, transformation, and inner clarity, it starts right here in the silence with you. Thank you for showing up, for choosing growth over comfort. We're just getting started. Let me ask you something you've probably never paused to consider. What story are you telling yourself every single day without even realizing it? Not the one you share on social media, not the one you tell your friends. I'm talking about the silent, looping narrative that plays when you're alone with your thoughts. The one that says, I'm not enough. The one that whispers, I always mess things up. The one that quietly repeats, people always leave me. I'll never be successful. I'm not lovable. I'm not strong. Now, here's the truth. You didn't write that story consciously. It was written for you, piece by piece, moment by moment, by other people's words, by their rejection, by your childhood environment, by your failures, by your pain. And without realizing it, you started living it out like a script. But today, I want to offer you a powerful invitation. You can rewrite it. You don't have to live in a story that was built in your lowest moments, narrated by your deepest insecurities, and held together by fear. Let's break this down. Every person walking this earth is living from an inner narrative, a belief system they carry like invisible ink on their skin. Most of them didn't choose it, they inherited it, absorbed it, got conditioned into it. When you were younger, someone might have told you that you were too sensitive, too loud, too quiet, too ambitious, not ambitious enough. And instead of challenging that judgment, you internalized it, you made it your truth. Now, every time life presents you with an opportunity, that script kicks in. Don't speak up, you're too much. Don't dream big, that's not for people like you. Don't try again, you always fail. Here's the danger. The story you repeat becomes your identity, and your identity becomes your limitation. You're not held back by who you are, you're held back by who you think you are. When I was living as a monk, we were taught something that changed my entire view of self-identity. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness behind them. Let that sink in. If your thoughts are negative, it doesn't mean you're broken. If your story is painful, it doesn't mean you're doomed. It just means you've been living in a narrative that was never yours to begin with. But here's the empowering part. If you didn't write it, you can rewrite it. You can pick up the pen and become the author of your own identity. So how do you begin? Step 1, expose the narrative. You can't change what you're not aware of. So sit with yourself, honestly. Ask, what beliefs am I repeating every day? Where did they come from? Are they true or are they just familiar? Because there's a massive difference between truth and familiarity. Sometimes pain feels safe, not because it's right, but because it's all we've ever known. You've told yourself for so long that you're unlovable, that now love feels suspicious. You've told yourself for years that you're a failure, so now success feels like a fluke. But what if those beliefs aren't reality? What if they're just residue from a story you never consented to? Step 2, challenge the voice. You don't have to accept every thought that walks through your mind. Thoughts are like guests. Some are welcome. Others need to be shown the door. So when that old voice creeps in and says, you're not good enough, you respond with, says who? When it says, you'll never change, you respond, watch me. This isn't about toxic positivity or pretending everything's fine. This is about mental discipline. You are the gatekeeper of your mind. And if you don't learn to challenge your internal dialogue, it will run your life on autopilot. And autopilot never leads to transformation. Step 3, speak the new story out loud. I know this sounds simple, but it's powerful. Say things that reflect the identity you want to grow into, not the one you've outgrown. Try this. I'm learning to trust myself again. I'm worthy of love even in my imperfections. I am no longer entertaining narratives that make me shrink. Do this even when it feels fake, especially when it feels fake, because rewiring your brain doesn't happen through belief. It happens through repetition. You don't build confidence by waiting to feel worthy. You build confidence by speaking it, living it, and proving it to yourself over and over again. And don't just say it, back it with action. If your old story says, you always quit, then today, keep one promise to yourself, even something small. If your old story says, you're not strong, then do one thing today that requires courage. Because here's a hard truth. Your brain doesn't care what you say, it cares what you do. You teach yourself who you are by the habits you reinforce. That means every choice you make is either reinforcing an old story or rewriting a new one. But I want to be honest, this journey isn't easy. There will be days you fall back into old narratives. You'll hear that voice again. You'll feel unworthy again. You'll doubt yourself again. That's normal. Rewriting your story isn't a one-time decision. It's a daily practice, a daily confrontation with your own patterns, a daily commitment to stop living in a story that was written in your wounds. So let me leave you with this today. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not too late. You are someone who was handed a script that never reflected your full truth, and now you're brave enough to rewrite it. You're peeling back the lies. You're questioning the labels. You're stepping into authorship, because the life you crave will never fit inside the story you've been surviving. You were not born to be a side character in your own life. You were born to lead, to create, to transform, but it all begins with this choice. Do I keep repeating the old story, or do I rise and write a new one? Let me hit you with a tough truth. If you need others to tell you who you are, they'll also have the power to tell you that you're nothing. Read that again, because this is where most people live. In a loop of approval seeking, validation chasing, and people pleasing. They hand over their identity like it's a resume just waiting for someone else to stamp it with worthy. But here's what they don't realize. When you outsource your self-worth, you make yourself emotionally homeless. You walk around asking people to build a home inside you that only you were meant to construct. Let's take a step back and ask the real question. Where did you learn to measure your worth by other people's responses? Maybe it started in childhood, the way you were praised only when you performed. Maybe it came from heartbreak when someone left and you thought it was because you weren't enough. Maybe it came from social media, this constant scoreboard of likes, followers, and filtered perfection. But wherever it started, it doesn't have to continue. Because here's the truth. Your worth doesn't need to be earned. It needs to be remembered. I remember sitting across from someone during a coaching session. They were exhausted, drained, not by work, not by responsibilities, but by the emotional roller coaster of trying to be enough for everyone in their life. They said, Jay, I just want to feel like I matter. And I said, then stop asking people who don't see your value to define it. That silence in the room, that wasn't defeat. It was the beginning of clarity. You can't ask people who benefit from your insecurity to confirm your confidence. You can't ask people who profit off your self-doubt to remind you that you're enough. Self-worth is an inside job. And the moment you build it from within, the outside world loses its grip on your peace. So let's talk about how to do that. Because it's not just affirmations and journaling. It's deeper, it's harder, it's sacred work. And it starts with this. 1, stop tying your worth to your productivity. You are not your output. You are not your career. You are not your to-do list. We live in a society that worships hustle, that equates being busy with being valuable. But ask yourself, honestly, are you building success or are you just staying busy to avoid feeling worthless when you slow down? Your value is not tied to how much you do, it's tied to who you are when you do nothing. If you can sit in stillness and feel at peace, not because of your achievements, but because of your presence, you're already free. 2, stop tying your worth to relationships. Too many people believe they're only lovable if someone else loves them. So they chase connection, they tolerate disrespect, they settle for half love and call it romance. Here's the truth, no one wants to say out loud, if you don't believe you're enough without them, you'll never feel enough with them. Relationships should complement your self-worth, not compensate for the lack of it. And if you're constantly proving yourself to someone, it's not love, it's a performance. 3, build evidence that you can rely on yourself. You know what builds self-worth faster than any quote, podcast, or pep talk? Keeping a promise to yourself, not because it's easy, but because it's evidence. When you say, I'm going to wake up at 6 a.m. and you do it, when you say, I'll stop texting them and you follow through, when you say, I'm going to finish this project and you see it through, you're telling your nervous system, I can trust me. And that trust is the foundation of unshakable self-worth. Because real confidence isn't built from hype. It's built from follow-through. Let's be honest. This is where most people break down. They're good at starting. They're good at pretending, but they're terrible at being consistent. So their self-worth is constantly on life support, being revived by likes, compliments, or someone else's attention. But the day you choose to discipline your own energy, to stop waiting for a feeling and start building a pattern, is the day you become unstoppable. Self-worth is built in repetition. It's not glamorous, it's gritty, but it's how you start writing a story you can be proud of. Let me say something radical. You don't need to love yourself first. That phrase gets thrown around everywhere. You can't love anyone until you love yourself. But what if you just started with respect? What if you said, I may not love everything about me yet, but I will no longer tolerate treating myself like I don't matter? That's where it begins. Not with adoration, but with integrity. Speak kindly to yourself. Hold yourself to standards. Protect your time and energy. Respect, but it says there's love. And when you respect yourself consistently, love shows up as a byproduct. Now let's address something deeper. Shame. Shame is the poison that corrodes self-worth from the inside out. It says, you're not just someone who failed, you are a failure. You're not just someone who made a mistake, you are a mistake. Shame disguises itself as humility, but don't be fooled. Real humility says, I'm human, I'm learning, and I'm growing. Shame says, I'll never be enough, so why even try? You can't build self-worth on a foundation of shame. You build it by facing your past with compassion, not excuses, but compassion. Forgive yourself, not because what happened was okay, but because you are worthy of healing. Let's bring it full circle. You will never find your worth in someone else's eyes if you haven't found it in your own reflection first. You will never feel grounded in your relationships, your career, or your goals if your identity is still dangling from the approval of others. So today, I want you to ask yourself one question. What does someone who believes in their worth do differently starting now? Do they stop answering that text? Do they wake up earlier? Do they decline the invitation that drains them? Do they forgive themselves for what they did when they didn't know better? Choose one action that reflects the value you're trying to embody. Not because you feel ready, but because you're done waiting to be rescued from your own potential. Self-worth isn't built overnight. It's built moment by moment, choice by choice, boundary by boundary. But I promise you this, when you stop begging for crumbs and start feeding yourself with truth, discipline, and self-respect, you become someone who no longer needs the world to validate you. You've already validated yourself. Let me ask you something real. How much of your life is being lived for other people because you're too afraid to set a boundary? How many yeses do you say just to avoid guilt? How many texts do you reply to because you're scared they'll think you've changed? How many times have you let someone's presence in your life become louder than your own peace? Here's the truth. If you don't learn to protect your space, the world will invade it. If you don't learn to say no, people will keep expecting yes. And if you don't set boundaries, your life will be lived on someone else's terms. Let's get one thing clear. Boundaries are not walls. They're not a rejection of love. They are the conditions under which real love can exist. Think of your life like a garden. Boundaries are the fence. They don't keep people out because you hate them. They keep the weeds from choking what you're growing. If you allow everyone to walk through your life without limit, you'll spend your entire energy cleaning up footprints instead of planting purpose. And that's not selfish. That's sacred stewardship of your time, your heart, and your mental clarity. Here's the problem most people run into. They mistake guilt for growth. The first time you set a boundary, you'll feel guilt. Not because you're wrong, but because you're doing something different than what your old self used to tolerate. That's not a sign you're doing something bad. It's a sign you're healing. You're interrupting the version of yourself that stayed small just to make others feel comfortable. Let me be honest with you. Growth will always make someone uncomfortable sometimes. That someone is you. But discomfort is not a reason to shrink. It's an invitation to expand. Let me tell you a story. A woman came to me once and said, "Jay, I'm exhausted. I'm doing everything for everyone and it's draining me." I asked, "When was the last time you said no?" She paused and said, "I don't remember." That's the problem. When you never say no, your yes loses its value. You teach people that your energy is unlimited, your time is disposable, and your presence is guaranteed. But you're not infinite. You're not available 24/7. And you're not here to be a human resource for everyone else's convenience. You are a soul, and your soul needs rest. Your soul needs space. Your soul needs boundaries to breathe. Here's what boundaries actually sound like. I'm not available for that right now. That doesn't work for me. I need some space to process. I care about you, but I can't carry this right now. Notice something. They're clear, they're kind, and they're firm. Boundaries don't need to be loud. They don't need to come with an essay of justification. They just need to be consistent. And remember, the more you explain your boundary, the more room people think they have to negotiate it. There's a moment of clarity that hits you when you realize this. Not everyone deserves access to every part of you. You can still love people and limit your exposure to their chaos. You can still care and say, "That's not mine to carry." You can still forgive and unfollow, because peace isn't just about what you allow in, it's about what you remove. Some people will never respect your boundaries because they benefited from your lack of them. They got used to the version of you who overgave, over-apologized, and overextended. But if it costs you your mental health, your values, your identity, it's too expensive. Let's break it down. There are 3 kinds of boundaries you need. Satu, time boundaries. Stop giving your prime hours to things that drain you. Your mornings are sacred. Your focus is sacred. If someone constantly hijacks your schedule, that's not connection, it's consumption. Start asking yourself, is this how I want to spend my energy today? If the answer is no, don't hand over your most valuable currency, your time, to people who won't invest it back. Dua, emotional boundaries. Some people only show up when they need a place to unload. You're not a dumping ground for unresolved pain. Yes, be kind, be compassionate, but also be clear. Ask yourself, do I feel lighter or heavier after I talk to this person? If you constantly feel drained, it's not a coincidence. It's a pattern, and you get to choose whether it continues. You are allowed to protect your peace without explaining your sensitivity. Tiga, energetic boundaries. You've felt it before. Someone walks into the room and suddenly your nervous system is tense. Your energy shrinks. You go into people-pleasing mode. That's your body telling you something. Energy is contagious. And if you keep exposing yourself to people who operate in chaos, you'll find yourself living in a storm that was never yours. Choose people whose presence feels like peace, not pressure. Now, here's the resistance I hear all the time. But Jay, won't people think I'm selfish? Let's clear this up right now. Self-respect is not selfish. Peace is not rude. Boundaries are not betrayal. People who love the healthy version of you will adapt. People who only love the version of you they could use, they'll leave. And that's okay, because not every loss is a tragedy. Some are a realignment. Some are a blessing in disguise. And you'll never experience your full power if you keep watering dead plants just to prove you're a good person. So here's what I want you to do today. Take out a piece of paper, write down one area of your life where you feel the most drained. Then ask, what boundary would protect my energy in this space? Don't wait until you're exhausted to make changes. Don't wait until you've been disrespected one more time. Boundaries are not a response to harm. They are a commitment to self-respect before harm even happens. You don't have to fight every battle. You don't have to argue your worth. You don't have to attend every invitation. You just have to trust that the life meant for you will never require you to betray yourself to keep it. Boundaries are not about pushing people away. They're about protecting the version of you that's finally coming alive. And that version of you, they deserve to be preserved. They deserve to be protected. And they deserve a life that doesn't require over-explaining, over-apologizing, or overextending to feel safe. This is your space. Guard it with grace. And never again feel guilty for choosing peace. Let me ask you something. Most people never ask themselves, are you in love or are you emotionally dependent? That's a tough one, right? We've been taught to believe that needing someone is the same as loving them, that the ache in your chest when they don't call back is somehow proof of how much you care, that the anxiety in their absence is somehow romantic. But what if I told you that what most people call love is just unhealed insecurity dressed up in flowers and longing? That's not love, that's dependency. And it will quietly steal your freedom, your identity, and your peace if you don't recognize it. I want you to hear this clearly. No one else is responsible for your emotional regulation. Not your partner, not your friend, not your family. They can support your healing, but they can't do it for you. They can hold space for your growth, but they can't carry the weight of your unresolved pain. That's your job. That's your responsibility. And the moment you reclaim it, you stop living like a prisoner to someone else's behavior. You're emotionally dependent when your mood rises and falls based on how someone treats you. You need constant reassurance to feel secure. You adjust your boundaries just to keep the peace. You feel anxious when they don't respond quickly. You shrink yourself to avoid conflict. Sound familiar? That's not love. That's survival. It's a nervous system screaming for safety in a relationship you're afraid to lose, even if it's costing you your peace. And here's the truth. Emotional independence is not about detachment. It's about maturity. It's about staying rooted in your identity, even when love is in the air. Because real love doesn't demand that you disappear to be loved. Real love allows you to expand. Let me share something from my own journey. There was a time in my life when I confused closeness with control. I thought being deeply connected meant I had to constantly be available, constantly check in, constantly respond. But I started to notice something. The more I tried to prove my loyalty through emotional overinvestment, the less I respected my own boundaries. I wasn't showing up in love, I was showing up in fear. Fear of being abandoned, fear of not being enough, fear of losing the connection unless I performed. And that's when it hit me. If your love costs you your sense of self, it's not a relationship, it's a transaction. Here's the truth you have to face. You were not created to complete someone else, and no one was created to complete you. You are not half of a soul waiting to be finished. You are whole. And the moment you remember that, your relationships transform. When two complete people come together, they don't cling, they choose, they co-create, not codepend. That's emotional independence. Let's break down how to build that kind of independence. 1, learn to sit with your emotions. Most people panic the moment their partner withdraws. They spiral, they chase, they overthink. But emotional independence means you don't need someone to fix your feelings. You know how to name them, feel them, and move through them. When you feel anxious, instead of sending 100 texts, ask yourself, what story am I telling myself right now that's making me feel unsafe? Because often the trigger isn't what they did. It's what you made it mean. Your partner didn't text back. You told yourself that means you're being ignored, unloved, forgotten. But emotional independence means you question that story before you act on it. 2, hold your boundaries even when you're afraid of losing the connection. Emotional maturity says, I love you, but I love me too. That means you don't bend your boundaries just to keep someone close. You don't say yes when you mean no. You don't tolerate disrespect just because you're scared of being alone. In fact, the ability to walk away from what disrespects you is the clearest sign of emotional strength. It's not coldness, it's clarity. 3. Stop making other people the regulators of your self-worth. Let's be real, if someone's silence can make you question your value, that's not love, that's a wound. Your worth should not rise and fall with someone's attention span. Say it with me. Their approval is a gift, not my oxygen. Because the day you tie your identity to someone's opinion is the day you give them power over your peace. Now, here's what happens when you start building emotional independence. You stop texting just to get a reaction. You stop over-explaining to earn understanding. You stop chasing relationships that don't reflect your value. Instead, you speak your truth calmly. You let space be space. And you trust that if it's meant for you, it won't require you to abandon yourself to keep it. And yes, this will challenge people, especially those who are used to your emotional dependence. They'll say, you've changed. You'll say, I've healed, because healing does look like distance. It looks like saying, I don't need you to validate me anymore. And not everyone will celebrate that, but that's okay. You're not here to make everyone comfortable. You're here to grow. So let's redefine what healthy love actually looks like. It's not constant closeness, it's mutual respect for space. It's not endless reassurance, it's inner security. It's not dependency, it's freedom. Healthy love says, I want you here, but I don't need you here to know who I am. That's the most magnetic kind of love because it's rooted in choice, not fear. And choice is where freedom lives. So today, I want you to reflect on this. Where am I making someone else responsible for my inner stability? And how can I take that responsibility back? Not in anger, not in ego, but in love. Because emotional independence isn't about shutting people out. It's about showing up with strength, with clarity, with presence, because you've done the work to hold yourself first. And when you can do that, you stop entering relationships out of need. You enter them from overflow. You stop clinging and you start choosing. And that's where love becomes real. Let me ask you something that most people never stop long enough to consider. What if the silence in your life right now isn't punishment, but preparation? What if this season of solitude, you're in this space where it feels like nobody's checking in, no one's watching, and everything still isn't about loneliness? It's about alignment. Because here's the truth. Purpose doesn't show up in the noise. It whispers in the quiet. And if you keep drowning your life in distractions, you'll never hear it. We live in a world obsessed with performance, always doing, always showing, always proving. But the most purposeful people I've ever met, the ones who walk with clarity, confidence, and calm, they didn't find their calling in applause. They found it in isolation. They sat alone. They reflected. They got quiet enough to hear what the soul had been trying to say all along. So I want to tell you something today that might shift everything. Your purpose isn't lost. It's just buried beneath the noise. Think about a compass. It only works when it's still. Spin it around too fast and you lose your direction. The same is true with your life. If you're constantly caught up in activity, you'll confuse motion with meaning. But just because you're moving doesn't mean you're headed toward purpose. Sometimes the most important progress you make is sitting still long enough to decide where you're actually going. When I left everything behind to become a monk, people thought I was crazy. Jay, you're throwing away your career, your connections, your opportunities. But I wasn't throwing anything away. I was returning to something deeper. And in that solitude where no one was watching, where no one was clapping, I met the real me, the one beneath the expectations, the one beyond the titles, the one that wasn't chasing approval anymore. That's when I realized I don't need a map to find my purpose. I need a mirror. Because purpose doesn't come from chasing more. It comes from becoming more of who you truly are. Let's break it down. If you're in a season of solitude right now, don't rush to escape it. Don't fill it with Netflix, Instagram, texting people just to feel busy. Sit with it because this silence is sacred. It's not empty. It's full of answers that can only be found when everything else fades. Here's how to start turning that solitude into purpose. Ask better questions. Most people ask, what should I do with my life? How do I find my calling? But purpose doesn't respond to surface level questions. It answers depth. So ask, what pain in my life have I been called to heal for myself and others? What experiences have broken me open in a way that gave me wisdom? What makes me lose track of time because I'm so in love with the process? Purpose often hides in your wounds, not just your wins. It's not about what makes you look good. It's about what makes you feel alive. 2, audit your alignment. Purpose doesn't arrive in a lightning bolt. It's revealed in the small, quiet decision to live in alignment with your values. Ask yourself, am I living in a way that reflects who I want to be? Does my calendar reflect my priorities? Am I spending time on what actually matters or just what's urgent? You can't live with purpose if your days are filled with obligations that drain you. Purpose is fueled by intention, and intention requires boundaries, awareness, and discipline. 3, start before you're ready. Most people wait for clarity before they take action. But the truth is, clarity comes from movement. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. Stop saying, when I feel more confident, then I'll start. Confidence is not the starting line, it's the byproduct of commitment. Do one thing today, no matter how small, that reflects who you want to become. Write one page, record one video, sign up for that class, call the mentor, research the idea, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. Purpose doesn't need perfection. It needs participation. Here's something else. No one tells you the path of purpose is often lonely at the start, because when you choose alignment over approval, you'll lose people. When you stop chasing what looks successful, you'll confuse people. When you start living for something deeper, you'll trigger people. But here's the gift. Eventually, the people and opportunities that are aligned with the real you will find you. You just have to be you long enough for that to happen. Don't be afraid to stand alone. Every revolution, every movement, every legacy started with someone who was willing to look crazy for a while. They weren't the most popular, they weren't the most liked, but they were the most aligned. Your solitude is shaping that same strength in you. It's teaching you not to flinch in discomfort, not to chase praise, not to settle for mediocrity just because it's easy. And one day when you look back, you'll realize this season of silence didn't break you. It built you. Let me say this clearly. You don't have to monetize your purpose. You don't have to post it on social media. You don't need a TED talk to validate it. Your purpose might be raising a strong child, creating art that heals people, building a business that helps your community, becoming someone who makes others feel safe. Whatever it is, own it fully, because a quiet purpose is still sacred. A private purpose is still powerful. The world doesn't need more noise. It needs more people living on purpose. So today, stop asking, when will I find my purpose? And start asking, am I creating a life that's worthy of the person I'm becoming? Because purpose isn't found. It's chosen, crafted, and cultivated. And the more you lean into solitude, not as punishment, but as preparation, the more clearly you'll see who you're here to become. You're not behind. You're not lost. You're in the in-between, the sacred space where transformation begins. And this season, it's building a version of you that the world has never seen before. Let's talk about something raw. Something almost every person experiences, but few truly recover from: betrayal. It's the kind of pain that doesn't just hurt, it shatters. It doesn't just break your heart, it breaks your trust in yourself, your ability to judge character, your belief in goodness. And what makes betrayal so cruel is that it doesn't come from your enemies. It comes from the ones you let closest, the ones you confided in, trusted, loved. That's what makes it cut so deep. It's not just about what they did, it's about what it cost you inside. But hear me when I say this. The betrayal that broke you doesn't have to define you. It can refine you, rebuild you, resurrect you if you let it. Here's the truth nobody wants to face. People betray you for who they are, not for who you are. Let that sink in. It wasn't because you weren't enough. It wasn't because you were too much. It wasn't because you made a mistake. It was because their integrity couldn't hold the weight of your presence, because your light exposed their shadows, because your trust was too sacred for someone who hadn't yet earned the right to carry it. Their betrayal reflects their weakness, not your worth. But I won't sugarcoat it. Healing from betrayal is brutal, not because of the person who hurt you, but because of the stories you start telling yourself after they leave. Maybe I deserved it. Maybe I should have seen it coming. Maybe I can never trust again. And suddenly, you're not just grieving a person, you're grieving a version of you that felt safe in the world. That's the real loss. But what if I told you that version of you wasn't the strongest one anyway? What if I told you the version of you that's rising right now, after the tears, after the confusion, after the silence, is the most dangerous, beautiful, and powerful version you've ever met? Because now you see clearly, you trust yourself. You've stopped confusing potential with proof. You've stopped handing out access to people who haven't earned it. That's not bitterness. That's boundaries born in fire. Let me be real with you. Betrayal can either harden you or humble you. You can become cold, closed, guarded, or you can become clear, rooted, discerning. The difference isn't what happened to you. It's what you do with it. You don't need to get revenge. You don't need to prove them wrong. What you need is to rebuild your relationship with you. Because the most damaging part of betrayal isn't that they lied to you, it's that you stopped trusting your own judgment. But that's the piece you get to take back. Here's how you protect your light after betrayal. 1. Stop replaying what happened. The more you revisit their actions, the more you keep bleeding from the same wound. Closure doesn't come from answers. It comes from acceptance. You may never understand why they did it, but understanding isn't the same as healing. You heal when you say, I don't need to solve the mystery of their behavior to move forward with my life. 2. Grieve the version of you that didn't know better. Don't punish yourself for not seeing the red flags. You loved from a pure place. You trusted because your heart was open. That's not weakness. That's courage. But now you've learned, and growth often requires a funeral for your old patterns. Let yourself cry. Let yourself feel. Then let yourself rise. 3. Build new boundaries from the lesson. Every betrayal gives you a blueprint, a list of what you will never ignore again, what you will never explain away again, what you will never tolerate again. Write that list, not from anger, but from clarity. Your boundaries aren't about locking everyone out. They're about filtering who belongs in your peace. 4. Reclaim your energy. You know what betrayal steals most? Your focus. You spend so much time thinking about them, their motives, their lies, their silence, that you forget to feed you. It's time to take your energy back. All that mental space you gave them, redirect it. Create something. Work on your goals. Invest in your health. Serve others. They took a chapter. Don't let them hijack the whole book. 5. Surround yourself with people who celebrate your healing. Not everyone will understand your boundaries. Some will say you've changed, and that's the point. You have changed. You've evolved. You've upgraded your access. And now you need people who clap when you say no. Celebrate your clarity. Respect your silence. Love you without needing to control you. Healing happens faster in safe spaces. Find them, build them, protect them. I want you to remember this. The betrayal wasn't your fault, but the healing, that's your responsibility. You can't wait for an apology. You can't wait for justice. You can't wait for them to recognize what they lost. You heal because you're tired of bleeding for someone who isn't even in the room anymore. You heal because your future deserves a version of you that isn't stuck in the past. So here's what I want to leave you with. If you've been betrayed, if you've been left without closure, if you've been carrying the weight of someone else's lies on your chest, let this be your moment. your line in the sand, your declaration to the universe. I may have been broken, but I was never destroyed. I've been delayed, but I'm not done. This pain ends with me and my power begins now. Because the light inside you, it's not fragile, it's not fading, it's ferocious. And the people who can't handle it, they were never meant to walk with you anyway. You don't need to dim to make others comfortable. You don't need to shrink to make others stay. This is your season of becoming, and every betrayal was just fuel for your fire. So protect your light, not out of fear, but out of faith in who you're becoming. Because the most dangerous person in the world is the one who healed without losing their heart.